Here are 4 incredible success stories involving SPs, featuring long periods of no contact, and even situations with third parties. These stories demonstrate that time is irrelevant when it comes to manifestation. Everything happens in the now. I hope these stories inspire and motivate you.
Story 1, SB, success after 8 months of no contact and third party involved. Today, my ex-SP reached out to me. She unblocked me and texted a simple, "Hey." I didn't reply. A few hours later, she sent another message saying she finally understood the pain I went through. She forgave me for everything I had done and expressed a desire to meet up, catch up, and clear the air. To give you some context, my case was very desperate. I made a fool of myself. 2 people from her circle distanced themselves from me because of my behavior. I did some foolish things that a broken-hearted person might do. She stopped talking to me 2 months after our breakup and moved on to someone else about a month later. Now I've heard they've been having fights. Perhaps she's beginning to understand how I felt. It's been 8 months since I had any news from her. I was blocked everywhere, and she seemed to have moved on completely. She even told me she was tired of my nonsense. At that point, I felt doomed and made things worse by acting out, but in March, I started practicing meditation and following Neville Goddard's teachings. From March until October, I struggled deeply with feelings of depression and desperation, working through my own darkness and traumas. I've always been someone who daydreams a lot and has manifested small things like extra money, modeling gigs, specific events, and so on. Recently, though, I decided to focus more on myself and other aspects of life. When it came to my SP, I often daydreamed about bumping into her and talking to her as if it were real. During meditation, I would immerse myself in these scenarios, going deeper into a transcendental state. Interestingly, I did end up bumping into her about 5 times, even though I live in a big city, but she ignored me because I wasn't specific in my manifestation. I had only manifested meeting her, not reconciling with her, because it felt more realistic to imagine running into her than actually making up with her. Eventually, I realized I needed to imagine the end result. I rebuilt my faith and began practicing sats, state akin to sleep, during meditation. Once, in a deep, transcendental state, I would let my mind wander, visualize what I desired, and then fall asleep. Here's my advice. Feel it as real. Truly immerse yourself in the emotions of your desired outcome. Find your self-worth again. Work on building yourself up. Write your future story. Clearly define what you want. Plant the seed. Trust and believe. Have faith that it's already happening. Live your life. Let go of the outcome and trust the process. Time is an illusion. Live from within and trust that the bridges of incidents will appear in front of you. You may not recognize them right away, but they are guiding you. Be on autopilot. Relax, let go, and let things flow naturally. I was a desperate case, maybe the worst, but I'm proof that trusting in yourself, your power, and your connection to the universe can bring about change. Remember, you are the universe, connected to everything and everyone.
Story 2. You can manifest a relationship with anyone. I wanted to share a story about how living in the end and not worrying truly works. This is an older success of mine, but it's how I manifested my first real long-term relationship with a very specific person. It's a bit long, but it serves an important purpose. It only dawned on me tonight how often I've unintentionally manifested relationships, including my current one. For context, this story takes place during my college days, when I was young and extremely shy. It was my first year, and I had enrolled in a mixed-level class. Freshmen to seniors could take it. My best friend at the time was also in the class with me. The first time I saw him, he was an older student and very well known on campus. You know those college movies with the popular crowd everyone talks about? He was part of that. Midway through the semester, I noticed he'd occasionally look at me, and my instinct was to quickly look away, pretending I wasn't staring. By the way, I never spoke to him during this time, not once. One day, I jokingly told my friend, "He's so cute, you watch, I'll be dating him by the end of my senior year." She laughed and said, "Oh, sure you will," because I could barely even say hello to people back then. That semester, I might have said one word to him. Most of the time, I just daydreamed about being his girlfriend, goofy, harmless thoughts, nothing serious. Fast forward a year and a half. By the end of that semester, I had forgotten about him entirely and started dating someone else off campus. Interestingly, my crush disappeared from campus altogether. Then my third year began. At the start of that year, I had just broken up with my boyfriend and decided to approach things differently. I moved onto campus to attend more events. One day, while walking to class, I bumped into someone coming out of the library. "Hey, aren't you from that class?" It was him, my old crush. And he remembered my name and face, even though we'd never spoken. It turned out he had been overseas for a year and had just returned to finish his degree. We chatted for a few minutes before I had to go to class. But the fact that he remembered me, that was something special. About a week later, I came back to my dorm to find my roommate and him sitting on the floor, playing a game. I was stunned. He looked up and said, "Hey, I didn't know this was your room." My roommate didn't know we'd met before, and later mentioned how much she liked him. Awkward. 1 week after that, I was hanging out with people from another sorority during rush week. They rented a party bus, and we stopped by his house for a party. I was told he'd stepped out, so I didn't expect to see him. As fate would have it, I was holding the bathroom door for a friend when he walked in. "Hey, I didn't know you were coming," he said with a smile. We talked for a while. Nothing major, but it felt significant. The next day I saw him online and decided to start a friendly conversation. I messaged him saying I had fun last night and didn't get a chance to say goodbye. To my surprise, he replied almost immediately and asked me out to lunch. Of course I said yes. After that, things took off. On one of our dates, he asked if he could kiss me and see me again. And that was the beginning of it all. Moral of the story, you absolutely can manifest a relationship with a specific person. Even though I barely said a word to him for a year and a half, he still remembered me when he came back. Time doesn't matter. It will happen when the time is right. It all felt so natural that I didn't even realize it until now. All I did was affirm to myself a few times, "He will be my boyfriend by the end of my senior year." I daydreamed, stayed lighthearted about it, and forgot about it until he reappeared. We dated for 2 years before insecurities got the best of me, but that's a different story. What I've learned is that manifestation works, even when it feels silly. As long as you trust the process and stay aligned, the universe will bring it to you. Thanks for letting me share my story. Now I've got some playful daydreaming to do about my man in that ring.
Story 3. It took 2 years, but I manifested my SP back. I just wanted to share my success story to give anyone who needs it hope that, even if it takes longer than you want, and even when the situation feels hopeless, the law is the law. It always works, and you will get what you persist in believing. My boyfriend broke up with me in June 2018. I was so desperate to win him back. That's how I stumbled upon Neville's teachings in the first place. I would do Sats religiously, and seemed to make progress with communicating with him and starting to mend things. But then we'd get into a huge fight and not talk for weeks or even months at a time. I had a lot of anger and resentment toward him, and to be honest, my mental diet was not consistent at that time. Hence the spotty results and always taking 1 step forward only to take 2 steps back. When I tell you it got bad between us, I mean it. He blocked me everywhere. We said horrible, nasty, hateful things to each other. At one point, I seriously considered taking him to court. We hadn't talked for months, and I hadn't seen him in person in about a year. Somehow, I still loved him. I knew that even though we have our issues, both as individuals and as a couple, as adults in our mid-30s, we are absolutely capable of resolving those issues if we want to. And I wanted to. Despite all the bad words we exchange and all the hurt feelings on both sides, I just knew, and know, in my heart, that everything between us is fixable. And that when things are good between us, he gives me a joy that no one else gives me. I know this is the man I meant to be with, so I decided in earnest to apply Neville's teachings, and all I can say is, wow, it works. I started doing some things in July 2020 to shift my beliefs and ignore my current reality, and within about 3 days of doing that, my ex and I started seeing each other again. We were officially back together within 2 weeks. It took 2 years of struggling with my mental diet, but after literally days of shifting my mindset and persisting in my new beliefs, I got him back, and our relationship is better than ever. I'd like to share what worked for me, hoping that anyone who is struggling as I was may benefit from my experiences. I read Neville every day. It helps that I have a student with whom I'm studying his teachings. When she and I read together, and I have to break things down in simple English, I'm an EFL teacher, it really helps me internalize his messages. One thing that really started the shift in me was reading that whatever seed you plant will grow. He explained to my student that if you plant an apple seed, it will not grow into an orange tree or a pear tree. When you plant an apple seed, only an apple tree can grow. So whatever you plant in your mind will grow and appear in your 3D reality. That's the only outcome that is possible. Anything else is impossible. An apple seed will not and cannot produce a cucumber. Your thoughts will not and cannot produce anything in the 3D other than what you plant into your consciousness. I know that's so obvious and was really a dumb moment because it seems so simple, but it made me realize how careful I have to be with what I allow into my mind. I stopped following the news. I stopped watching or listening to anything that made me feel anxious, depressed, inadequate, or doubtful. I don't read posts from people struggling in their relationships. I've recently slowly started getting back into the news and the real world, but I knew that if I truly wanted to shift my mind, I needed to eliminate anything that made me feel bad, at least temporarily, until I became strong enough to ignore what's in the 3D around me. I started actively and consciously consuming anything I could about manifesting, the law of attraction, positive thinking, healing trauma, self-help, etc. When you keep being taught that your mind creates your reality, you start to believe it. I also started reading Dr. Joe Dispenza and Joseph Murphy, among others. The constant daily reinforcement that I had already attracted the love of my life helped me accept it as true, even though I hadn't seen it in the 3D yet. Reality transurfing or dimension jumping. I constantly told myself that I'm in a new reality now, a reality in which my partner and I are together, married, and happy. I've created this reality in my mind, so it now exists in the universe, and it must be so. Whatever arguments he and I had in the past don't matter, because that happened in the old timeline. But now I'm in a new timeline, so those things can't affect me now. They don't even exist on the same track that I am on. This constant mental reminder any time I had very momentary doubts was probably the single biggest thing that helped me accept reuniting with my partner as fact rather than wish. Honestly, early success gave me the confidence that I was, in fact, on the path I wanted to be on. The first time my boyfriend and I went out to dinner 2 months ago after so long apart, everything just flowed and fit so easily together, as though we had never broken up at all. It happened so naturally and effortlessly, just as Neville said it would. My boyfriend remarked more than once that night, and has continued to say in the 2 months since, that I am not the same person I used to be, in a good way. He also is not the same person. I have manifested the better version of him that I had been dreaming of for so long. Experiencing how amazing it was on that first date cemented my belief that I was in fact living in the new reality that I had chosen for myself. Not going to lie, I focused all my attention on him and the relationship I wanted to have with him. I can't exactly say that it was a glusting for results, because after just a few days of conscious and consistent mental effort, I knew without a doubt that I had created a new relationship for us. But I constantly remind myself that it's happening, it's on its way. It feels good, and it's exciting. He's my wallpaper on my phone, so I see his face many times throughout the day. I saved him in my phone as husband, so whenever he texts or calls, I reinforce that we are already married somewhere in the universe. I just have to have fun waiting for that to show up in the 3D. Whenever he sends me a sweet text, I take a screenshot and read through many of them throughout the day to remind myself that this is my life now. This absolute dream of a man is sharing his life with me, and I am so grateful. I hope this post helps anyone and everyone who finds themselves stuck in the same rut I was in for 2 years. Once I finally admitted to myself that my own bad thoughts and mental arguments were getting in the way of my happiness, and when I fully threw myself into the process of reprogramming my brain, my miracle came within a matter of days. I truly wish you the same happiness, fulfillment, and love that I have found.
Story 4, manifested my SP back after a year and a half using SATs. Hey everyone, I recently commented under a post asking what we accomplished by persisting in our assumptions. I mentioned that I manifested my SP back after a year and a half of absolutely no communication, and a few people wanted to know more, so I was like, all right, I'll tell my story. Here goes. 2 years ago, me and my girlfriend at the time agreed to move in together after dating for a year, with plans of marriage and kids and that lovey-dovey stuff. Without going into details, we broke up in January 2019 after a huge fight. So brutal that when I messaged her a month later to get back together, she blew me off by saying she never wanted to speak to me ever again and to have a nice life. Now, that moment, I said to myself, this is not over, but regardless, I moved on. A few months later, I still had feelings for her because to me, she's like the one that got away. That's when I discovered Neville. This was gold to me. A light switch turned on in my head and suddenly I realized I manifested our breakup in the first place. It's difficult to deny any of this. It took me 1 full year to truly grasp his teachings and finally put them to practice. No matter what technique you chose, they only exist to get you into this state of your wish being fulfilled. Fast forward to early 2020. For some reason, there is something magical about SATs. When you visualize before falling asleep, I constructed a scene where I am feeling the texture of her wedding ring and with her telling me she's happy that we're finally married. I visualize this scene every night and sometimes during the day, over and over again to the point of almost feeling it physically real. This went on for a month. Suddenly, little by little, my whole mood drastically changed. I went from hoping it'll happen to living in the end. Like Neville said, I started to daily walk in that assumption. I looked at pictures of us together, admiring them, saving cute posts that I want to share with her, etc. Whenever doubts arose, I immediately went back to that scene in mind. I will say this, the how or the when isn't our concern. Our only job is to believe we have already received it. Fast forward to July 2020, her birthday came up. I emailed her happy birthday. I know we're not supposed to lift a finger, but this was inspired action. For months, I lived in the end. And so if we're married, I can wish her happy birthday. Right. If I got no reply, no worries. Well, she didn't respond. Deep down, I said, she hasn't responded because she's busy with work, so she'll respond when she's free. 10 days later, I got her response saying she barely saw my email because she was busy, just like I said she would. We talked and joked, as though no hard feelings were there. She admitted she dated other guys after our breakup and compared them to me. That's when she realized the special bond we had, resulting into her having regrets. A bridge of incidents were happening behind the scenes the whole time. The rest is history, and we're still together to this day. I want to give one advice: only study Neville, go straight to the source. Anyways, enough rambling. Thank you for listening. And remember, so when you sleep this night, sleep as if it were true, and daily walk in that assumption, though false at the moment, if you persist in it, will harden into fact. Neville Goddard.